My golden child of a brother tried to set me up for something that I really did do. But the worst part is, it came out to benefit him, and he didn't even give me any credit. There have been expectations of me all throughout my life. I've expected to carry myself in a manner that would paint my family in a proper light. I was not expected to lead this kind of life outside the house alone. Even in the house and in places that seemed private, I was still expected to comport myself. My parents were not willing to take any chances, and I was not the only one who was tasked with proper behavior in and off the public eye. My older brother Damien suffered the same fate, but he was so much better than me. He was the genius of the family, and his grades in school were always better than mine. The reason for the whole drama is my parents. My parents are politicians who, I can say, can't boast of any notable achievements in politics. Perhaps you are wondering, like most people, what political failures like my parents were still doing in politics, then the answer is simple. Their parents were into politics, and their parents before them as well. There was news that they passed around that my great-grandparents were the founding fathers of our town. I'm certain it's a lie. They just circulate the news around to save their face. Don't get me wrong, I love my parents to the moon and back, but I would not support a lie. The only fact which could support their claim is the chains of businesses that they owned. I would not say my parents owned the town where we lived, but they did have a measure of influence. Just a measure of influence, though. My parents owned several chains of businesses which was established long before my father was even born. This was where they got the funds that they were using to support their political career. Well, I could call it ambition, but not a career. If it were up to me, I would just advise them to sit back, enjoy the money that they make. I don't see the need to hold a political office when you live a comfortable life. I'm not against politicians at all, don't get me wrong. But I believed that anyone who ventures into politics should be someone who has the heart of the masses. And well, even though my parents are not bad, I can't say how passionate they truly are. The election period is forthcoming in a few months, and my parents are going about with the whole campaigning thing. This is like the millionth time my father would be gunning for the post of mayor. He's the closest opposition to the current mayor, but if I were to place a bet, would wager on the fact that their efforts would not amount to anything. For the sake of everybody around them, which includes my brother and me, I hope it turns positive this time around. The experience which everyone in the house was made to put up with last time that they lost is not something I want to remember. Update number 1, a few days later. As I noted during my last update, the set date for the election period is approaching pretty fast, and things are beginning to go amiss in our little town. The prices of things have skyrocketed, and the economy's not favoring the masses as it used to. Now fingers are being pointed at my father, and I would not stand in his defense. It's always been the attitude of politicians to make the tenure of the current mayor ungovernable, so the masses who had voted him into power would be disappointed at their decision. These politicians who were engineering this mayhem behind the scene would suddenly appear and salvage the situation. They would present themselves as the savior of the masses, and this would endear them to the masses' hearts, thus giving them the edge in the forthcoming elections. The prices of things in this town have gone up, and there was no second guessing it. My father had a hand to play, though. This was not difficult to see because most of the factories in the community that produced and supplied these goods suddenly increased their prices under the guise that the cost of production was now just high. These factories were owned by our family. As expected, every other sector had to equally increase the price of services rendered, and there were massive protests in the town. Burglary was now becoming the order of the day, and robbery was even taking place in broad daylight. The whole thing became unbearable to the point that the members of the community took to the streets in protest. Well, posters that slandered the administration of the current government were littered all over the place. The mayor and his people knew the whole thing was politically motivated, but there was no concrete evidence that could implicate anybody, much less my father. The uproar quickly caught the attention of the state, and in the bid to manage the situation, an announcement was made that the governor would embark on a 3-day visit to our town, where he would attempt to appeal to the masses on the essence of peace and harmony. The moment the announcement was made, my father suddenly began a generosity campaign, where he began donating food items to individuals and families. He made it known that it was one of how he chose to show that he stood for all the governor stood for, peace and harmony. While everyone applauded his generosity, I initially felt he was just doing it to get the attention of the governor, who was soon going to be visiting our small town, and I was not wrong. My older brother and I walked in on my father, excitedly telling my mother that their plan had worked, as he had received a letter of commendation from the governor's office. This was nothing much, but it was a step in the right direction for my parents. They were happy the governor had at least recognized their existence. The moment my parents observed our presence, they warned my brother and me to never make mention of what we just heard right then and there. And my parents were responsible for inflating the prices of things and turning around to now become charitable when the uprising came. My school finally announced that the governor and mayor would be visiting us on one of those 3 days that he would be spending in our town. We were all encouraged to prepare a presentation and submit it to the school board for approval. Once approved, the presentation would be made when the governor arrived. Most of the students did not seem interested as it wasn't mandatory. Neither did I. I, however, got an idea for a presentation that I felt was going to be fantastic. It was going to be great, and that was how I decided to join in on the whole thing. My presentation was going to border on peace and harmony. It was fitting for the times in which we lived, and I know that I'm not a genius and all, but I saw it as a means of impressing my parents and every other person for the first time. I gathered quotes about peace, which I wanted to rehearse in the presence of the governor and everybody else. I took it to my genius brother so he could see my quotes and give his own candid opinion about it, at least before I made a mess of myself in public. Now, if the issue was just making embarrassment myself in front of everyone, then that could be managed. But my parents would have my head for not bringing the family honor, especially at a time when they were canvassing for a sensitive post. So, I got to my older brother's room to find him working on something which I felt was going to be his presentation. He was surprised when he learned that I wanted to participate in something like this for the first time. I hand him my quotes to him, and after taking a few seconds to go through the whole thing, he busted out in laughter. He noted that it was a good thing wanting to take part in the activity, but my presentation was not suitable for this occasion. I finally made up my mind to just quit the whole thing when he further warned that the presentation could earn me a jeer rather than a cheer. I thanked him for not letting me make a mess of myself. The governor would be coming to our school in 2 days, and I'm very much grateful. My older brother advised me against participating. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. There's a few more updates for this story. I hope you guys are enjoying your day so far. Here is update number 2. The governor came to our school yesterday, and I'm currently typing this with a bruised eye. The day was quite colorful, let me tell you about it. My parents would have loved to be there as it allowed them to meet with the governor, but the occasion was out of bounds for parents. It was meant for the students and the teachers only. So, we were gathered together, and after the ceremony had begun, students began coming forth to make their presentations. There was occasional applause for a wonderful rendition from a student. The moment which everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. It was the moment when my brother was about to make his presentation. Just like I had earlier noted, my brother was not just a genius at home. He was equally known for his brilliance in school, and both students and teachers looked forward to his presentation because they were certain it was going to be the best. So, my brother's presentation was last. This was purposely done by the school authorities. They were trying to save the, quote, best for last. His name was barely called when there was applause. The moment we saw Damien make his way to that platform with a broomstick, we all knew that we were in for a performance. The dignitaries were anxiously waiting to see what this boy, who was a mere presence, had commanded applause would render. My elder brother dropped the broomstick to the ground and began saying some things which sounded familiar. I had to listen intently just to be sure I was hearing things correctly. I began hearing things like, quote, "Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to handle conflict by a peaceful means. An eye for an eye only makes the world go blind. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, then you and I would know peace." I nearly jumped out of my seat. Those were my quotes. The very quotes that I'd written out on a piece of paper and taken to his room. The very quotes that he clearly stated were going to embarrass me and the family. How come he was now delivering my speech, and rather than embarrass him, everyone seemed captivated by it? I knew the truth, but I found it hard to accept it. My genius of a brother was holding the whole gathering spellbound by something he had made me throw away. The closure, which my older brother gave to the speech, was absolutely epic. He invites the governor upstage. This was a daring move. Those who have done their presentation before him were almost fidgeting in the presence of the dignitaries. The governor honored his request, and when he got to my brother got a broomstick and asked the governor to break it into as many parts as he wanted. The governor did so with ease. He then took the whole bunch and asked that the governor broke it just as he's done the broomstick. The governor found it difficult, and my brother then took the broom, turned the rest of the crowd, and said, "We were all vulnerable when we separated ourselves, but remained indestructible while united in purpose." The moment my older brother made the last statement, which was equally a line from my write-up, the whole place broke out. There was a standing ovation just to honor him. I was speechless. Why would I not be when my older brother had just given my speech? I watched him soak in the glory which the crowd was pouring on him. The only thing I could say he came up with was the broom. And I mean that both literally and practically. I'd come up with every other word, sentence, and the line which came out of his mouth. Everyone cheered for this thief. He went back to his seat, and if looks could kill, then he would have been dead 1,000,000 times over. I looked at him with anger. My heart's never been so broken before. It was a pain I've never felt. This was the first and only time in my life that I've attempted to do something great, and my brother, whom I've trusted, just denied me the opportunity. I did my best to stop the tears from rolling down my eyes, so people did not misinterpret it to mean I was jealous of my brother, Damien. The ceremony finally ended, and students flocked around Damien. He had made the school proud, and I was sure the news would get to our parents quickly. This was too much for me to take, but I had to take it anyways. Our driver finally arrived to take us home, and the school authorities dropped a message with him to deliver to his parents. My parents demanded to personally bring us to school the next day. I was certain it had to do with singing my brother some sort of praise. The moment my older brother and I got into the car and we've driven out of the school, I pounced on him with every anger in me. Our driver had to quickly park the car and put a stop to the fight, but that was not before Damien, who was stronger than me, left me with a black eye and a broken nose. I cried through the rest of the journey home, and my brother had not only broken my heart, He equally broke my nose. The physical pain did not hurt as much as what I felt inside, though. The moment we got home, I locked myself in my room, and I was willing to hear my brother gloat about a victory that should have been mine. Update number 3. Have you ever gotten to a point in your life where you wished you were the only one alive because every other person sucks? That's where I'm at right now. My parents got the summoning from the school and they dropped us off at school the next day. I could rightly guess the reason for the summoning. We all got into the principal's office and my parents were warmly received, and the principal began praising them for raising a child as bright as my brother. You could see the heads of both my parents and brother swell with pride as the principal recounted the events that's taken place the previous day. The principal informed them that the governor has decided to award my older brother a scholarship through any college of his choosing, and once he graduates from high school, of course. My feet were heavy. It could barely support me at that point. The scholarship did not hurt me, as my parents had enough funds to train my brother and send him through college to any level of academic height he desired. But the fact that my brother was getting on account of something which he stole from me is absolutely sickening. That was not the only shocking news that I was going to hear, though. The principal finally pulled a letter out from his drawer and presented it to my parents. It was direct from the governor's office himself. My elder brother was being invited to perform at the statehouse in the coming weeks, and my parents were invited as well. I watched the eyes of my parents go absolutely buck wild. They were finally getting close to the governor, and this was a direct result of my brother's performance. My parents left the school that day feeling very proud of my elder brother, the thief. I knew that they would probably give a hero's welcome once he returned from school. The news of the scholarship and invite quickly spread around the school ground. Teachers began using my brother as a reference point of what a model student should look like. If my brother was such a model student, then it meant they were training people to become thieves who would take credit for other people's achievements. Well, my brother walked across school with pride. Everyone flocked around the model student. I did my best to ignore the whole thing, and my brother and I returned from school that day. And the whole atmosphere was just so celebratory. It was on a Friday, and since we would be home the next day, my parents decided to throw a little party for their special golden child. I was up in my room listening to the whole thing, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. I got out of my room and I attacked my brother with a knife. I know you might believe that I went to the extremes, but if you were in my shoes, you would not judge my actions. Everybody was shocked. I could not inflict any bodily harm on my brother, as so I wish I did. The party abruptly came to a standstill, and Damien was terrified. The boy he had given a bruised eye was back with rage that he could not control. My parents were trying to wrap their heads around the cause of my sudden attack. They immediately had me locked in my room to cool off, and the party went on without me. My parents made sure photos or images of the outburst did not leak. My parents sent me for the next day, and my dad began pouring out his anger towards me. He wasted no time in making me see how I was not contributing to the success of the family in any sort of way, and how I almost harmed their first son, who was helping them achieve their goal of ruling the town. At this point, I quickly broke down in tears right before them all. My tears did not move either of my parents. Well, they impatiently waited for me to get a grip on myself before telling them the reason for not celebrating with the family. I finally found my voice and narrated to them how their son, who was being celebrated, was an absolute fraud. My parents asked my older brother if my accusation was true, and he didn't even outrightly refute my claim. He, however, noted that though I had come to seek his advice, He told me that my piece needed to be worked upon, but I was too lazy to do so. He claimed it was after I've shown an unwillingness to perfect it that he decides to take over. My brother told the half-truth, and the half-truth is still a lie. All the same, the half-truth that he had admitted to was enough to make my parents reprimand him to some degree. After my parents had admitted right before my parents that he had stolen my idea, I was expecting my parents to finally see things from my point of view and discipline my brother according, but it was not the case. And I quote, "This is not enough reason to kill your brother. What would the massive say when they heard that the aspiring mayor could not handle the little affairs at his own home?" My father shouted at me. This was a concern, what the people would say. I get the fact that I should not murder the only brother I have over an idea, but my father was not being just at all. I resumed my crying again. I thought to myself that this man was only interested in his political career, and he would actually miscarry justice just to get it. I looked to my mother to see if she would support her husband or if she would call a spade, but she was in sync with her husband, of course, claiming that I should be happy my brother was able to deliver the piece with such perfection that has given the family a chance to appear on the global map. Well, that sounds like nothing close to a reprimand, and, well, nothing at all was given to my brother. There was no one I could turn to. If my parents could mistreat me because of their ambition, then there's no one I could rely on. I'm currently being denied my weekly allowance from my parents, and this is my punishment for asking that justice be served. My mind is made up. One thing is certain. Everyone who was involved in making me cry, my father, mother, and brother, would most definitely pay for it one way or the other. Update 4. Well, I've gotten back on talking terms with my brother, even though I'm still angry with him. My revenge was certain to come, and as a matter of fact, befriending him is part of my ploy, just to make him pay for all that he's done. My parents are pretty preoccupied with their campaign, and they recently leveled up by giving their campaign a whole new phase. They came up with an agenda called TEAM. T-E-A-M. Posters where my parents and brothers were standing beside each other with brooms in the right hand were littered all over the place. This movement projected my father as someone who was actively chasing after a peaceful town where everyone worked hand in glove to achieve success. All the charade was just rubbish. They were trying to please the governor before the statehouse. Well, and this move only proved how desperate my parents could be. From their recent shenanigans, I can boldly say my parents are far from the kind of leaders that our town needs. They would certainly not stand for justice. This is my opinion, though, and my view is not shared by many. Everyone else saw them as saviors. My older brother, Damien, was about to graduate from high school, was already being roped into politics. Well, I plan to see things that do not work out well for us. Don't bother painting me black for trying to ruin my family. I don't care what people think of me at this point. My family can go down the drain for all I cared, and I would not shed a single tear. After my parents had taken away some of my privilege for attempting to hurt their son, I went to ask my brother for forgiveness. That pompous fool still felt entitled to an apology. He saw himself as being wronged. He could not hide the joy that came as a result of him getting away with what he's done to me. The reason for offering an apology where so I could have my privileges, the financial part most especially restored, and to get close enough to him to strike. My brother was foolish enough to accept my apology. If only he knew what I had in mind, he would be the one begging for peace. After gaining his confidence, I began making my parents see that we were getting along pretty well. I finally had them convinced when I offered to help my older brother Damien come up with something good for his upcoming presentation. Up until then, he had not yet come up with any idea about what he wanted to do. I laughed on the inside as saying, quote, this genius of the family was still stretching out his empty brain in search of something good. You should have seen the way he accepted my offer with open hands. My parents restored my privileges the very moment they learned that I volunteered to help my brother out with his presentation at the statehouse. It took me just 2 days to come up with something. I proposed it to my brother and did the same thing he had done in school with a little tweak to it. The idea was that he would repeat the same recital that day, but his conclusion should focus more on what teamwork could achieve. He was calling up 2 folks, handing over a broomstick to one and a broomstick to the other. They then would be asked to attempt sweeping. The results would be obvious. It was then that he would round up the acronym for team. Together, everyone achieves much. My brother went wild with excitement. He knew he was bound to receive another standing ovation the moment he rounded up his presentation by telling the people to present his acronym for team. I couldn't deny the fact I was surprised I could come up with such a thing. I'm starting to believe I'm the genius here. And I'm now beginning to question my older brother's past successes. Who knows if all the things he had been praised for in the past were just him robbing somebody else of their idea. If he could do it to me without feeling bad for it, then he most certainly could do it to someone not even related to him. Damien updated my parents on the plan. My parents were equally pleased with the idea, and they told me I was doing well by standing right behind my brother. Quote, a win for the family is equally a win for you. It does not matter, though, whom it comes by. That's what my father noted. I didn't want to seem offended, and I lit up with a smile and simply told them I understand that we were doing was just an example of the teamwork which they're advocating. My father told my mother that they would utilize the duration of the event to get close to the governor and make their intentions known. Once the event was over, they would print fresh team banners which constituted of both the governor, my parents, and my older brother, with each one holding up a broom. If their plan goes on as planned, then my father could likely end up as the next mayor of our town, as virtually everyone's now tagging our current mayor as incompetent. Their plan would hopefully not turn out well, as mine is already in motion. Update number 5. Final update. There's a feeling that you get when you do some revenge. So yeah, there's a feeling that revenge brings. You might not understand, except you're certainly in my shoes. Well, it's been a week since the trip of the government house, and my family's currently on fire. Well, my parents and my brother are the ones feeling the heat. I may need to recount the whole statehouse experience so you can understand a bit better. I remained the active assistant of my older brother for the few days before the presentation. He just would not stop bossing me around. The day finally came when we all went to the statehouse, and my parents were ready to execute their plan, while mine was already in play. I was backstage with Damien, and, well, he prepared for the presentation as he was somewhat nervous. I'd secretly gotten a purgative into his meal before we left home, and so while he was preparing for the show, he suddenly felt he needed to rush to the restroom. While he was at it, I had 2 glasses of champagne brought for us, and I quickly spiked both glasses with something strong enough to temporarily knock out his senses. The moment my brother came back, he did not need to be invited. He quickly went for a glass, as I knew he would. My parents had let my brother have his first taste of champagne during the party that they've thrown for him, and he never stopped talking about it. I feigned as though I was not in support of him taking it, as he was about to go on stage and needed to be focused. But my brother said it was a harmless little glass that would calm his nerve. Before I could say anything more, he quickly made it 2 harmless glasses. Damien finally went on stage 15 minutes later, and it was quite a presentation. He staggered straight to the stage. Everyone looked on as the model student, as some called him, and found it hard to compose himself. They could not make any meaning out of it. The governor and the dignitaries present were confused as they wondered if the staggering movement was all part of the presentation they've all been expecting. My parents' face was covered in horror. They have not been briefed on this part of the plan. I could swear that neither those present nor those watching the event live from across the state could understand what my older brother was saying. When it became clear that Damien was drunk, my parents ran to the stage to stop him from further embarrassing himself and the family, but that was their mistake. He began asking them to quickly go to the governor and do as they've planned. Everyone, especially the governor, was shocked because although Damien was drunk, the things he was saying were probably something his mind had stored. My parents tried shutting him up and taking him off the stage, but he soon became violent as he claimed that they were interfering with his show. When my parents persisted, he began calling them hypocrites. He suddenly turned and told everyone to hold my parents responsible for the uproar in the town because they were behind the inflation of the prices of the goods. My parents finally took their son off stage and we quickly drove home without waiting to be ejected out of the building. My brother's words raised some eyebrows, especially that of the current mayor, whom my parents have been trying so hard to displace. He was still acting mayor though, so he ordered an investigation into the matter. My parents lost face in front of the public, and with the current mess which Damien landed them into, they would most likely not compete for the post of mayor during the coming election. Even if they did, they were certain to lose. The governor immediately canceled the scholarship which he had awarded to my brother, who's currently lost face in the school where he was called a model student. My parents have assured him that he would go to a college of their choice, and that he would work to pay his fees throughout his stay there. I'm satisfied with how everything turned out to be. I didn't get recognition for my work, and that's okay. Knowing and seeing everyone get paid back in their coin, well, that was enough for me. Alright guys, let's break this story down because it was an absolute wild ride. First of all, if you were in OP's position, and you knew your entire life growing up that Damien was basically the golden child, he had the better smarts and better looks is what OP said. So knowing all that and knowing OP finally had the courage to try to make something of his own and present it in front of everybody, Damien, his brother, the one he trusted the most, was the one that backstabbed him. Let me know your thoughts and exactly how you would go about handling this situation because it was a tough one. Drop your thoughts down below, guys. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing so you never miss another story. Have a fantastic day, and remember, it's cool to be kind. I'll catch you guys later.